Right everyone, WeaponCollector here. Right, I was recently asked on a YouTube video, possibly one of my knife making videos, about what the bare minimum tools are, or what beginner tools you need for making things like knives, or you know, all that kind of stuff. Knives, throwing knives, any sort of what people would call weapons, all of that kind of stuff. If you want to get in your shed making stuff, basically, what would be the bare minimum tools? So this is what I think is the bare minimum tools. I'll show you them and I'll explain them all, and the alternatives. And the majority of it is hand tools, because I think you really only need one power tool to make most things, and I'll explain that later. So the first thing I would definitely say is you do want safety gear straight away. You're always going to want a mask. The higher quality the better, but one of these will do as a bare minimum. Depending on what you're doing, you're probably going to want ear protection, and you're definitely going to want eye protection. You could also add to that gloves and other things, but that's your bare minimum protection. So then we get down to the basic tools. I use a hammer pretty much every single time I make something, so you're definitely going to want a hammer. Doesn't have to be a claw hammer, but a claw hammer will help because it's got the nail puller. So definitely a hammer. Saws, I always use saws, so I'd recommend getting a hacksaw. Doesn't have to be a full-size hacksaw though, could be a junior hacksaw. A junior hacksaw like this one hasn't got the blade in it, will do the same as that will. So you can get away with a junior hacksaw. Something I nearly always use is a handsaw, a wood cutting handsaw. I definitely recommend getting some kind of wood cutting saw. Screwdrivers are something I always use. So you could get something like this with the multiple ends where you can change them, or you could just get a dedicated set of screwdrivers. But you'll use screwdrivers a hell of a lot. Pliers are very handy, because pliers can be used like a spanner. And if you've got ones that will cut wire, you then get the capability of tightening things, squeezing things, pulling things, and cutting wire. So pliers are very, very handy. Some kind of spanner set would be good, but again, you don't need a spanner set, because you could get away with pliers after time, or a single adjustable spanner, adjustable wrench. That will do if you don't want to buy a spanner set. But yeah, you do want something that can undo and tighten nuts, stuff like that. That will be very handy. Pencil and a tape measure, they're a must really. You need to mark things and you need to measure things. That's your sort of bare minimum for measuring stuff. You can go a lot more than that, but you definitely want a tape measure and a pencil. Some kind of knife, you could have a Stanley knife, nice retractable blade, very sharp, change the blades. But you can also just use your standard pocket knife will do. That is just to cut things basically. So yeah. Chisels are always very handy, you know, just a small basic set of chisels will do. You won't use these as much as some things, but these are very, very handy. I do use chisels quite often. Sandpaper is good. Various, doesn't have to be wet dry sandpaper, but some kind of sandpaper, because I'll find you will use quite a lot of sandpaper. Well, not quite a lot, but you'll use it in lots of different situations. What you'll see here is most of these will cover what a power tool can do. You can buy a belt sander, but you don't need a belt sander. You can do it by hand. Most of the stuff that you can use a machine, you can do it by hand. There's probably one thing I think you can't do by hand very well, which I will mention. So yeah, sandpaper. It's always handy to have a couple of paint brushes as well. You know, you'll be finishing things. Yeah, it's always good to have a couple of paint brushes. Files are always very handy, and the bare minimum files I would recommend having are a very rough file, one like this, like a rasp file or a rasp, you know. I don't know the detailed names of some of these files, but they're just files to me. So a very rough rasp file, a finer standard sort of file, and then a couple of other different shaped files. So this is a little half round one, and this is a round one, and maybe a little square one, but you can get little sets of those and sets of those for not a lot. They're very handy. You can use those on wood, plastic, metal, stuff like that. I would say you're going to want some glue. So the standard PVA glue is enough, but you'll use glue for quite a lot of different things. And the last two things I'd mention, one of the things I use every single time I make something is a vise. You don't need a big vise like this. This is just what I've got. You do not need something of that size. A little vise will do, but for any time you're cutting stuff, filing stuff or anything, a vise will make everything 10 times easier. So as I said, don't have to be a big one like this. It can be a little it can be a little vise, but if you can't get a vise at all, a clamp is better than nothing. At least you can put something on your bench. A bench is your other thing. You do want some kind of surface to work on, some sturdy surface. So you do want some kind of bench, but you can get those folding benches. That's good, better than nothing. You do want a dedicated bench. You can clamp stuff down with a G clamp at least, so that's better than nothing. So then lastly is the only power tool I would recommend you need really is a drill. Again, doesn't have to be anything like this kind of size. It can be a small single-handed drill that you can get for around 20 quid. They'll last you a hell of a long time. I used a, think, 20-30 pound drill for at least 2 or 3 years once, drilling hundreds of holes in aluminium at a time. So yeah, doesn't have to be a big drill, but I do find that you can't really do any decent drilling by hand. You can get a hand drill, but the only thing you're really going to be able to drill with that is wood. As soon as it comes to drilling metal, it's just not going to work. But yeah, you can get a cheap drill for about 20-30 quid. You can also get, like I use, if you've seen in my videos, I'll show you it. You can get a cheap drill press stand. Mine's been modified, but it's so old, it's been broken and redone. But you can get a cheap pillar drill thing like this, and I think these are about 20 quid, something like that. I'm not 100% sure about the price on those, but that's not essential. But if you can get one of those, that makes it a hell of a lot easier. But not essential. But yeah, I would definitely recommend a cheap drill. Right, so there it is. That is what I think is the bare minimum tools you would need for making knives and all that kind of stuff that you see on my channel at home yourself. This is sort of the bare minimum. Let me know if you think there's anything I should add or other people should get, but do remember this is the bare minimum. Yes, you can get a lot of other stuff, but this would cover most of your angles with the bare minimum price and stuff that you would need. Just trying to think if there is anything else, but I can't really think of anything else that's essential. This would get you started, and this would get you doing most of the things I do. You know, if you watch my videos and wanted to follow on, I don't use much more than this stuff. I do use a little belt grinder because that just makes things a lot quicker. But everything a belt grinder can do can be done with these items here. You know, everything a jigsaw can do can be done with those there. Everything an angle grinder can do can be done with a hacksaw and a file. It's going to take a lot more work, but it can be done. You know, it's how people used to do it before. You know, before we had electricity and these tools that we have now, everything was done by hand. So it can be done by hand. As I said, the only one I find difficult is drilling by hand. trying to drill steel with one of these. This is how they work, like that. Is hard work. But it can be done. But I would just recommend nowadays getting a £20 drill, whatever it is. So yeah. Right, I hope you enjoyed the video. You'll have to excuse the noise, someone must be working in their shed. Yeah. Have a look in the comments. There may be some added extras. The only other thing I would say is get yourself some packs of screws and nails, you know, the assorted things of screws and nails and stuff like that, and washers and nuts and bolts. But most you can always just, if you've got something you're chucking away, take some of the bolts off it and that, you know, if you don't want to buy them. So yeah, nuts, bolts and screws are always handy for when you're making the things, but you don't have to buy them. You can take them off something if you've got an old washing machine or something. Yeah, most things you can get for free if you think about it. Yeah. The only other thing I could think of is possibly tape. Tape always comes in handy. Yeah. Right. So I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope you found it helpful. I hope it hasn't gone on for too long either. I'll have to see afterwards. But yeah. Right. Thank you for watching. See you later. Before you leave, if you ever wanted to support this channel, you can now via Patreon or by shopping at Amazon.com and Gearbest. There's more info below if you need that. Remember, if you want to get full notifications for this channel, click the bell, and I'll see you later. Cheers.